Hey, my name's Alfred Nutile, and I'm here with
Joe Bacal.
And we're just going to go through basically getting going with Laravel, but using two people here to help with this whole training scenario. My experience is I've been building Laravel applications for a few years now, or a couple of years. And Joe here hasn't built one. So together we're going to build a blog from zero to deployment. And hopefully by having the two different experience levels, we'll bring out some questions and answers that aren't normally met in typical training videos. Joe, your experience has been with WordPress?
Yep, mostly WordPress. A little bit of just like static stuff also, and a tiny bit of Drupal. But most of the majority of my web development has been, building WordPress themes and what we would call functionality that should be in a plugin but is in the theme.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sometimes that can be the easier way.
It's definitely the easier way. But I'm looking to do it the right way.
Yeah. Things,
I mean, whatever. I guess that's another podcast.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So with Laravel, one thing to keep in mind is the documentation is really a key thing. It's really good. So when I first started, it was like 4.2 or 4.1, or I forget what it was. It was a while back, maybe even in 3, because I had to start it for one project that I never finished because I left that company. So basically, the docs are just really great. And if you get time, just read through them. It's kind of, you might not get it all, but it's worth reading and seeing all the little nooks and crannies of things that are possible. So we're going to use these a lot along the way. Now, when we get deeper into the application, I'll install Homestead, which is a Vagrant box. And it's fairly painless to get going. Maybe we'll do that on your machine in a couple of, episodes.
Great.
But we'll start off locally because I think I should be able to do most of this inside of just PHP running as a server. We'll see how that goes. Migration's going to be a pain, but I've done this before that way and it was okay.
Okay.
So now, so we're going to go through installation. I'm going to introduce a couple of packages and we'll get going to scaffold a blog and then we'll go from there.
Great.
Now, the installation relies heavily on Composer, and it's pretty simple. With my Mac install, I already have Composer ready to go, and you just run this one command, and it pretty much gets you going. So I'm going to go to the terminal. I'm in my folder called code, and I'm going to run that command, but I'm going to put a little something in here, and it's just the name of the folder I wanted to make. So by doing that in a moment, it will just pull down all those libraries and get us going.
All right, now I have Composer.
Yeah.
And so I may as well just try to keep up here.
Sure.
All right,
Composer can be actually it's not too slow. I've seen so much worse. And my Composer's a little old. This tells me I really should be updating it.
So create project Laravel. So from the Laravel repository in the Composer package land.
Yeah, so it's pretty simple with Composer. This is basically the repo name on GitHub or Bitbucket or your own one, and then this is the account name and this is the repo name. So it's Laravel and then repo Laravel.
And then
preferred dist is it's Composer's good docs are really, I think they're good. Preferred dist is just a way of it's a tag to help with what you want to download, like how much. I'm not sure the exact syntax, but it basically, when you do things like that, you can make the download faster, or you can download more stuff or less stuff, like development files or source code or building code. Did it work out on your end?
Well, I have a warning that Composer is 60 days old, but...
Yeah, and it's a good one to update. I mean, it tells you right in the warning how to update it. It's pretty painless. I should do it too, because it just, bugs optimizations for sure.
Yeah.
And you have to do it as sudo because it's going to put that in the user bin, which is basically where sudo stuff happens, where it needs certain permissions.
I'm just going to let it do its thing now, though.
Yeah. Yeah. So now if I change into the particular folder we made, which was blog series, we now have a Laravel install. So what that means, I'll open that up in PHP Storm so we can see it in more of a folder structure. Let's see if I have, here was some of your code you had me look at.
Yeah.
No, I get it. It's good. It gets, it's cool how, honestly, I think that's why a lot of themers enjoy WordPress more than Drupal, because the theming system's it allows you to do a little more.
Yeah.
It's more forgiving.
Yeah,
so.
well, you get to just write some markup.
Yeah. Sorry, I must have clicked too many times. All right. So the folder structures, it's a lot of folders, but it gets pretty simple after a while. You have your public folder, which is where we're going to serve the site from, and you won't do much in here. We'll put some assets in there later on, but in the end, you'll use a different way to do assets, but we won't worry about that just yet. You have your vendor folder, which Composer made for us. Tests, which are really nice. We'll come back to that later. Storage. Resources, this is where we start doing our view stuff, so we'll be in here. What I was going to say is one thing you might not be used to is, I don't know if you've seen the .env syntax before. And basically, do they use this in WordPress where they can pass along?
No, I mean, to me, it's some, I mean, it looks like it's like constants.
Yeah. So what's cool is this file never gets put into Git, so we're going to use this to set some settings, but when you see us deploying it later on to a server, we'll never deploy this, but the server will have its own version of it.
Right.
And there's a PHP library that then reads this and sets up the server settings, so that when, it will have the database name and username and everything loaded from here. It's pretty neat format. We used to do this before with Rails, and I used to do it before Laravel did it because it was just so nice.
And it's not, is it doing the same thing as like Ansible would do, or it's less, it's more like configuring what can be configured in software, like...
Right. When you I forget the term. So when I don't want to do it in my, like if I did a print env, that would print all my environment variables for my computer. And it's the same thing. Basically, you're setting the environment variables at that particular level of the server. Yeah. So whatever it's a .env, I forget how to say the guy's name or the library name. I think it's included here. Should be. Oh, here it is. vLucas.
Okay.
This library then takes all that information and loads it up into settings. So then I could type. I don't do it this way because there's another way, but a lot of times you'll see yourself typing this, right?
Right.
And it would be like database, right? That's loading it into that.
I see.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a nice feature, cool. and it will come in handy shortly. So inside of there, to get us going, we want to use a database, and I don't want to set up Homestead just yet. So we're going to use a local database using SQLite. So I'm going to come into here. This is what comes with Laravel out of the gate. And there's an app key that's made when you install the application. This is what salts our passwords and helps to encrypt them. And we have our database host, database name. And then we have Queue. Laravel comes with a Queue built-in library that we can use a queue if we want to. So I don't know if we'll use it through this series, but it is a nice workflow.
So what's a queue?
Oh man, it's a really nice design pattern. From a simple standpoint, when you have an application that is doing something that might seem fast, like a person is submitting a form, and that form is going to email the owner, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to necessarily have them wait till the email's done.
Till it's really done, yeah.
Yeah. So you put it into a queue, and then Laravel has a queue daemon that's running to say, hey, there's a job on the queue. I'm going to process it later on. And it's a great,
That's great. That's good.
Yeah, it's really fun design pattern, and it gets your applications really fast. But we're going to go into the config, and here there's a database file. So Laravel boots up. If you think about it, it's really simple, right? When you hit the index file, Laravel bootstraps itself here. And it bootstraps itself here to then set a time, but then it grabs the auto load that Composer gives us. And then from here, it does some work with compile to speed things up, but that's not something to worry about. It's just neat to see how this works.
Yeah.
So you hit index, it boots itself up, and eventually back to Bootstrap. Now that that's loaded, let's go back there. Let's see, it loads that. I want to show the app loading. But eventually it loads here where it loads its application and dependency injection and so forth. So, but my point is it uses these config files to get settings that you could set here as well as in the .env. A lot of stuff happens in that .env file. But right here is a DB connection, and it's set to default to MySQL. So this function here says, give me what's in that server. So instead of typing server, right, we'll find ourselves typing env. And env, if you follow it through, is just a function that says, give me a key of what you want or a default if I don't have it. So we're going to go set the DB connection in our .env to SQLite. So let's go do that really quick. And that's just going to get us into a nice simple pattern with setting up our local site just so we don't have to set up Homestead just yet.
So when you set it in the .env, is it going to go magically write code in that config file? No.
No, see, so the config file is basically saying when I bootstrap Laravel, I'm going to look in these config files for all of my settings.
Oh, and if I get my SQL, do this. If I get...
Yeah. So it loads up the default driver we're going to use to talk to the database. And if it doesn't get one out of my env, it's going to default to MySQL.
Gotcha.
But whatever it gets, it just pulls from this array the key and values.
All right, cool.
Now, with this one, it says, okay, if you're going to use SQLite, then I'm going to go look in the storage path, which I showed earlier, and I'm going to look for this particular file. Now, of course, we can rename anything we want, but we'll keep it the way they say. And we're just going to go make that file really quick, and that will help us later on. So we basically have said, okay, we're using SQLite to keep it simple for a moment. We made our file. So we're going to, in a moment, get into the database. To begin with, let's split my terminal, and in here on the top, I'm going to start running PHP as a server. So PHP has a built-in server. So I'm going to just say PHP localhost 8181, and I changed into the public directory, and then I'm running this. And again, I usually don't work this way. I usually work out of Homestead, but I think we'll get everything we need out of this.
So does it matter where, so you changed up to your home directory to run that?
To public, because inside of public is the index file that you see, and once it hits this index file, that's where it loads everything.
All right,
you see,
so
and it's gonna get even cooler because this is the HTTP kernel, but Laravel also comes with a console kernel. So you're gonna see later on how we can write console commands to help in our workflow, or we're gonna use them like crazy to help in our workflow. So here we have our server running here, and you'll see it's Laravel 5, right? Now let's go see how this happened. It's so simple. And this is what I really liked about Laravel was it's so clear.
Yeah.
You're hitting a route and you're doing something with it, and then you're responding. And so an application is a request and a response. And WordPress and other frameworks are amazing, but there was so much mystery between the request and the response.
Yeah. You just learn to sort of know what part of the black box you can touch and what part you're not going to bother with.
Yeah. In the end, Laravel has some magic too, but
Yeah.
I feel like I've been able to explore the code a lot better.
So
for me,
what was the syntax? It was just PHP capital S dash capital S serve.
Just PHP dash capital S, and then I told it where to serve, localhost, and I had to do a port 8181 or anything higher than, I forget the number, but you just have to use ports that non-root user are allowed to use. There are limitations to this, but it does help when you just want to get cranking and have fun experimenting.
Now okay, good, I got it running.
So now if we look, okay, our route files in our HTTP folder, and again, it's really neat. Your application is not just a website. Sometimes it's a console. Sometimes it's just a daemon that's running that's taking requests and doing things, right? But in the HTTP area of your app is the controller and the route. So let's go look at that route. The route's pretty clean. It says when I get, which is a HTTP action, a home, I'm going to return the view welcome.
Yep.
Okay. Now, it's there's so much here. So basically, it just shows you how easy it is to take something in and give something out. I can even just return foo, right? But and it won't be as pretty. But what they chose to do was return view welcome. And if I go back to that resource folder under views and see welcome, it's just HTML, right? We're going to change this to be Blade, but we'll come back to that in a moment. So in this case, we have our route. Now, in the world of PHP, some people will say this is a static method, and it's not necessarily that way. Laravel has this thing called facades. So we're gonna look at that maybe more in detail later. But basically, it's really nice. You get this nice, clean, easy to use syntax, but you could also test this because it's not a static method. It's actually a testable, replaceable class.
But it's a static method in that there's a route class in there somewhere with a get method that you can throw at anything.
Yeah, if I were to import this class using PHP Storm, you see how it can also find the facade. So from the facade, I could say, Taylor Otwell or whoever did a nice thing here. They did the @C because they know that you don't really care about the facade. That doesn't really tell me anything. But if I go to the @C, I can see what the facade is doing. It's instantiating through the dependency injection system, this class with all of its requirements.
So not that I need to know it, but the facade is
just a friendly way to deal with code, right?
So you're saying that static method route get, the method get on the route class, you're saying that's the facade? It's a facade because it's obviously there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, so the facade is a shortcut, right? So the dependency injection system is a way of saying, is the way of connecting many pieces together, but simply, right? And I'll show you what I mean in a moment. So the facade says, oh, you want to use route? Well, I know, you really mean something else. You want to return the router, which was registered earlier on. Okay. But look how complex that is. It's saying, hey, give me the router class. And the router class has this constructor that I don't want to have to do every time I use it, right?
I see.
It's loading the dispatcher and the container. And if we were to dig into the dispatcher, it probably has stuff that gets constructed. Nope.
Right.
It went to the interface. If I look at the dispatcher, sometimes if you sometimes
trying to be awesome with you.
Well, sometimes you can have it find the correct thing. This is a contract, so it is finding the correct one. But if you can actually reference the real class, the concrete class, but you wouldn't want to do it here because of certain overall reasons. But my point is, if you dig deeper into the real concrete classes and not the interfaces, then you would go dig into that, and you'd probably see that they have complex constructors, right?
Yeah.
But PHP now has the reflection class, and so using the reflection class, it can figure out how to instantiate everything. Actually, it's let me show you something really quick because this isn't that hard. I'm making it sound hard. I want to show you this though. Watch this. We're going to go into Laravel, right? So one thing to remember now is you can explore this code as you could do with WordPress or whatever. And when you look at the framework or the foundation, a lot of this comes down to dependency injection. And I just got to find the right one here. It's dependency injector. What's my best way to get there? Container, I think. I could totally be wrong. We're going to find this, though, because this is really neat how simple it really is. Let's see if I bind that. So let's go into the application. And the application has registered base binding, service binding, instance apps, container. I don't think it's the container. Container. Bind, abstract. Okay, so if you go into this one here during the boot up of Laravel. It's going to talk to providers, both your providers and the ones that came in the vendor folder. And if you look at the providers, they're just ways to, let's find a good one here. Those are boots. Let's find a good provider that I can show you. I'm going to go back into the config folder, and down here is where people like registered providers, okay? So I'm going to go look at the auth service provider. And this will register things, right? And those things get registered by saying, hey, app, I want to make a singleton called auth. And when you load auth, when someone asks for auth, I want you to load this function.
Yeah, callback.
Right? Yeah, a callback, exactly. And it could be just a callback, but it actually can register something else, right? So this facade auth becomes this nice shortcut to do all this stuff. But what I was going to show you in that binding was that when we go back to here and we find function, oh, it must be in the container, sorry. No, not you. Let's see if I can find this. Okay. Here it is. Okay. So when we bind something, whether it's a singleton or whatever, it's pretty neat. It just says, what are you giving me? Is it abstract or is it a concrete class? Is it a closure? And then eventually it will resolve it, and it will put it into an array of resolvable or resolved classes. But I don't know if I'm showing you the one I really want to show you, but it's really cool because it uses the reflection ability of PHP, that it will dig into the constructor and be like, what do you need? And then it will find the classes it needs and then see what they need. It's really neat. So basically, the route is a good example of like how that simple thing I can now write really clean
it's the
code.
Tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. But we'll come back to that later. It's really neat stuff that will make a lot of sense and make it really easy to write stuff. And so it's calling that view. We already went there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use this knowledge to our advantage and start building a place to go see, to begin with, blog or post, we'll call it. So now there's a library I want to use that I don't use a lot. Well, I do use it a lot still, but it's a great way to get going, and it's a scaffolding library. I happen to fork the original version because I wanted to add some things. And most of these libraries you'll find on Packagist, and once you find it, they usually have an install. So this one, just install dev master, but you have to do it this way because I'm overriding it, right? So I'm saying, hey, I know there's a legitimate one, but now use mine instead, okay?
For when I'm pulling it in via Composer.
Only because, so if I was using, so this is the real one. This is the one.
Now, if I was, but also this one.
Well, it's even easier than that, or I won't say easier. It's even more simple. It's saying, but when you go to get this one, actually go grab mine. See how it has a different name?
Yep.
Because I'm overriding it, but I didn't register mine with Packagist.
I see.
Because Packagist, I was hoping to merge this back in, basically, with the guy's code, and I just haven't yet. He was a little slow in getting back to me, and then I just wanted to get some stuff done. So usually you could just say Composer require this and it would do it all for you. So let's grab this. Let's throw that right here. So now we have that. We have our repositories to override that. And this is very key actually too, because if you have private repositories, this is the pattern you use because Composer can't find them.
Right.
Now, I don't like to do Composer update unless I really have to. So I do an rm-rf vendor in Composer lock. And then I just do a Composer install because it's so much faster.
So take away the lock on all the vendor updates and reinstall everybody?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically I'm saying delete the whole vendor folder because don't even bother trying to go through it. And get rid of the lock file, which is what Composer uses to figure out what it has in place already, which can be handy to, we deploy that in all our projects because then anyone pulling it down or when we build, they know exactly what version we want. It's locked. But in this case, I'm like, no, Composer has to do a lot of work otherwise. It has to do a Composer update, has to figure out everything. So now we have that scaffolding code, and it's going to offer some nice shortcuts. So let's finish installing it. Now, I have to register it with our application, and I'm going to open up the provider and just throw these 2 lines in there. I think actually one. We'll go look in a moment. I think one's already there. So let's go look at our app environment. App provider. And it says, okay, under the register, let's throw in these things. So it looks like you do need both. But one is, I'm going to get rid of this one. I think the docs shouldn't have included that. But this one says, okay, this is pretty cool. So basically it's saying if you're working locally, then you're in development mode. And when you look in our .env file, you see it says app env local. Yep. It could say testing, it could say stage, it could say dev, it could say production. And or anything. It just helps you to know what environment you're in. And when you're here, we're going to register, like we were talking about, or bind this whole like namespace provider.
But you're not bothering with that when you're not local?
Yeah, because it's only used for me generating code. But,
I see.
But when I put this on production, the less code I have, the better, because it's going to be faster.
So it's like if I was doing a front end thing, it's like my Bower, it's like compiling a bunch of stuff that doesn't need to go, the source itself doesn't need to go to the server. So, but you're saying that's happening in PHP. There's stuff that there's libraries that you're pulling in and not needing their original copies somehow.
Well, it's more like when you look at your Composer file, you have require and require dev, right?
Oh, okay.
Now, by default, Composer will pull in require dev, but when you're pushing this to production, for example, you would typically use a flag. I forget the flag. It's like -- no dev or something. I forget. Mm-hmm. And maybe it was that preferred dist. But basically, because on production, you don't want to pull in all of these things.
Right, okay. But you're pulling these then for
here, right? Because we're working on it. And same with this one. Like, I don't need this on production, right? And also think about this. Every time this application starts, whenever anyone hits the index page, it has to bootstrap, right?
Yeah.
And everything that's registered with it has to instantiate. And if you're instantiating 200 classes because you're working locally, it takes up memory, it takes up time. If you can then go to production and reduce that by 100 because you just happen to not be using the other ones because you're not developing, right?
Right.
You've just maybe sped up your application quite a bit.
Right. So I don't. It's okay. We don't have to waste time on
it. Yeah.
But I don't totally get yet how there's going to be PHP. Like, let's say I pull in this library, the whatever you've pulled in here.
Yeah.
How is it that code? Is it getting compiled into something else? How is it that code is necessary locally but not in your app? Because, for example, with a front end thing, I'm compiling all this JavaScript into one big thing, or I'm compiling all this Sass into flat CSS that I'm never going to look at.
Yeah.
So, but with PHP, I always think that you don't need everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's even, let's see, so it's even more simple in the sense of let's go back to, let's see if I can show you, just to start from the top. Like when we boot up, we're saying, hey, bootstrap the app.
Yeah.
And the app is going down the list of things it needs to do, right? Yeah. Now, somewhere in here, it's going to say, hey, my, where's that? Hey, my app file, give me every provider that has been registered with me. Yeah. So here's a bunch of providers, right? And in every provider here then gets strapped up. So by the time the index page renders, we have access to every single
class. All those classes.
Yeah.
And through the autoloader, you're not requiring anything anywhere. It's just all there, ready to use.
All bound, all ready to use. And what we're saying is, actually, by the way, when you get to this provider that we have here to help us boot up things, don't do this because we want to save some space here with the process, space being memory and speed.
Yeah.
We're just saying, hey, if you're on production or not local, just don't load this. Just leave it alone.
We don't need that? So what do we
the
need it for
code's
locally?
there. Yeah, the code's there and everything, but we're just not going to load it up into memory.
All right, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. Like if you were to just do DD this app,
Yeah.
DD is like a die and dump.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Probably So if I was to do that and load this, that is the application. That is Laravel.
Yeah.
And this is everything it has set up to go.
Yeah.
So one of these we could say, I think it might be bindings. I think it's an array. Bindings, maybe it wasn't. It might be an object. Bindings, it's an array. So this guy here I was going to show you, but it might be, I'm just curious now. Yeah, but anyways, I'll show you where we just were. It'll be easier. So like these are all the things that are maybe being bound or resolved that we've looked at, and one of them would be the one that we were just looking at, which is what is it called again? Scaffold. That's an easy one for me to remember. So see how we see it down here, scaffold. We might even see it somewhere else if I knew where it was instantiated, right? Like maybe we'll see it somewhere. And my point is, like, if I now remove that, so if the environment equals foo, then it's not going to get loaded anymore.
Right.
It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not something you have to worry about too often. It kind of takes care of itself in the sense of most of the stuff you're not going to be this picky about.
Right. I guess what I don't get is, like, what code would I need for PHP?
Yeah.
What code would I need locally that I wouldn't need on production?
Well, not only this one, but Composer comes with it built in. It's like you don't need any of these, so I'm not going to load them, right? So this is required dev.
Oh, so okay, testing. Okay, that makes sense to me. I don't need to put my tests up there.
Yeah. There's another one we're going to use later on, which is a nice shortcut generator, and we're only going to use it to help make some relationships.
I get it.
And you would need that, yeah. It's a good question, though, like what other ones, and maybe we'll see some others as we go.
And then in the spirit of just wondering, I can't help it, with the database thing that you did earlier, so you wouldn't – so is it only because we're using SQLite that you just like put it in a directory like that?
Yeah, SQLite's
like you wouldn't do that with any other database.
Right, okay, SQLite's just a file, and it's really good actually. I mean, it runs most of our It's
like living the dream. It's all in one spot.
Yeah, you'll see like some limitations that we get around, but they're not bad. They're just nuances, and they can be a pain. But if you get around them, you could play around pretty quickly with some ideas.
All right, cool.
So with that scaffolding, we're going to get ourselves some nice shortcuts. And so to begin with, I'm going to introduce you to Artisan, okay? PHP Artisan is a command line tool for Laravel, and it's a command line tool that you can build your own commands off of really easily, but it comes with a whole bunch of commands, okay? And we're going to use a lot of these as we go. But this library makes one command that's going to be really handy. It's a scaffolding command, and it's going to give us all the basics we need to build an application. But then we're going to pick it apart and later on maybe not use it because we want to then experience the little like bits and pieces, right? So I'm going to go look at the docs really quick for that library. And let's go find it. And it's going to say, here's an example. PHP Artisan makes scaffold tweet, but we're going to call it post. And then give it a schema, okay? So let's do that. I'm going to copy this over, and then I'll explain it as I go. So,
is there like an artisan, like man artisan, or like artisan?
Every single. So if you just do PHP Artisan, it will show you everything, and everything itself you can do PHP Artisan help and then the name. So help route, help queue.
Okay, awesome.
And I'm going to show you how to code something in Artisan at some point because it's so awesome to be able to code console stuff. It's just a huge bonus.
Yeah.
So we're going to make a post resource, and we're going to call it singular because some conventions of Laravel and in Rails as well is to use singular when talking about a model or a resource. And that post is going to be where we store our blog stuff. We could call it blog, but post maybe, yeah. And it has a schema. We're going to see how this works out in a moment. And this library that we're using to scaffold has 1 or 2 bugs along the way. They have nothing to do with Laravel. They're just the library. You could do this all by hand in Laravel with the tools it gives you, but you're going to see in a moment what we're going to get out of this. So we're going to say that post has a title, and we won't give it a default. That's kind of just an example. And it's going to have a body. And that's enough for right now. Actually, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to say it's going to have a user ID. And with that convention, we're going to have a relationship to the user later on, but we'll explain that more later.
That's awesome.
And so I'm going to press this, and it's going to do all the work for us, okay? Now, what that means is it made a bunch of files for us, and we're going to really explore these. And it gave us a post. Now, a route. So let's start with what it made, okay? It made a migration. That's how Laravel builds its database. It's pretty much how Rails does it and other things. You have all these files here that get migrated as you run the artisan command. It comes with files out of the box, but what you got to remember with Rails is it doesn't want to assume, or Laravel, is that it doesn't want to assume that you want users or passwords. You might not want them.
Right.
You might be making a static site. You might be making a site that just gets stuff off of a queue, But it gives you these things out of the gate, and you can just delete them. But we're going to leave them, obviously. I'm going to get rid of the name because I never worry about that. And it gives you a password file. And we just made this one with that one command, and it just says when migrations are running, we're going to make a post table. Now it converts it to a lowercase with plural. Mm-hmm. And we're going to use an ID, which it takes care of for us. And we're going to do the title and the body and the user ID. And if they roll back their migration, we're going to also delete that table we made. Okay.
So that's wrapping up a bunch of SQL query stuff, like make a table.
Oh, hell yeah. You're never going to write SQL again, and you're going to love it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you enough how much I don't miss SQL. And I think all that stuff is great, but I just don't want to write this stuff.
Yeah. No, that's amazing.
And when you see some of our queries later on, it's just it reads so well.
Yeah.
And that's what I think, the eloquentness of Laravel is how well it reads, I think. So we've now, with that one script, made our migration. We've also made a resource folder called post. And in here we have our create post, our edit post, our index, and our show, okay? And it also made our main layout file. This is the file that encompasses all of our pages. And it's just a general bootstrap look at things. You can alter it like crazy. So it did all of that for us, okay? It also gave us this route called resource. So instead of get, it's called resource. Now, if I type PHP artisan route list, it's going to list out all our routes, which is 1//, right? But the moment I add that shortcut called resources, and I go back to here, we get out of the box what you would typically call, basic paths to make an application or a resource.
Yeah, that's
right.
amazing.
Yeah, and so now that resource should be set up now to do things like it's going to call to the controller and call to that method. Yep. So it also made for us the controller with that method. And so it has that controller, post controller, singular post controller, with all of the methods we need to then move forward. And here we say, hey, give me index. And this is what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. No crazy SQL. Post with that nice facade syntax, all. Give me everything and throw it back into my post index.
What is that? That's the view? Post.index is the view?
Post is a folder, .index is the file.
And you're passing it whatever's in the posts variable?
Yeah, this is a nice syntax that PHP has. It's basically saying this, but it's just that nice short syntax.
Yeah.
It's really, I love the how nice that, yeah. So compact makes that really clean. And so you're basically throwing post into your index. Now, if we go there, we see post and we see, hey, here's that post you gave me. I'm going to...
Oh, and it made the view.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like for each post, because now we're using the blade syntax, I'm going to iterate over them and give you curly brackets to throw the PHP into safely, because it's not going to allow, unless I do this, it's not going to allow certain code to pass. Like I can't pass JavaScript in there, for example.
Right. This is just, you can pass
PHP, it's going to echo that. I could do PHP as well. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and that's nothing wrong with that. Right. You'll see later on we'll do that. And then it iterates over that and makes a view force, which we'll look at in a moment, and gives us some buttons and stuff. And we're going to actually throw a paginator in here. I'm going to get there. So let's go look at what we made, okay? So with that one thing, we can go to the route it made, which is post, and we have an error, okay? Now, what is our error? Well, we never migrated, all right? So let's go back to that command line and do php arson migrate. And it's going to say, I'm going to take those files. I'm going to find which ones have not been run yet, and I'm going to run them. If I run it again, it just says, I have nothing left to do, all right? So every time we make a migration, we just run that, and it takes care of us. And when we deploy it, it takes care of it there. It's the smoothest migration process I've ever had. I had worked on Rails for a bit, and it was just like this. And then I switched over to Drupal for a while, I was at Drupal before that, and it was always hard to migrate stuff.
So basically,
not impossible.
Your database is like, well, what you're migrating is like schema stuff. You're not migrating data. You're just migrating.
We will migrate data shortly as seed data. You'll see that. Okay. But
like when we talk about syncing a database, we're talking about syncing all. If you're in Drupal and clicking this view to do that, you're talking about like schema stuff.
Yeah,
I mean with schema, like whatever data, all the magical stuff that Drupal has to store.
Yeah, but that is the content that we're not going to be migrating. We're mostly migrating, like you said, the schema, and it's referencing, what is the order to migrate in, right?
But Laravel needs to store stuff besides data in the database, right? Like it needs to store.
No. The only thing it stores in the database at this point, once you migrate, it makes a migration folder, a migration table. And that migration table stores the migration files, so it knows which ones it's done already, right?
That's great.
So if we go into database, storage. It used to be in there. I always forget this one. Select star from migrations, I think. See how it stores that? Now, we can say select star from post, and there's nothing in there, and it would actually be gone if I rolled back the migration. And then next time we...
Yeah, wow.
Well, it would be gone no matter what, you see, because
the migration is what created the post table.
Yes, and Laravel is just trying to use migrations to manage what's next. Like, because my next migration could delete a field in the post table, right. So that's why we keep order. Because maybe I messed up, or maybe I want to add to it.
Now that's good.
Yeah. I mean, so it's really a wonderful flow. But now we have our post table, just like that. We have our form that we're going to fix. And, we can give it a title and a body, and obviously user ID doesn't make sense right now. And now we have our process, right? We can view it, we could edit it, and we can, save it and go back and so forth.
So that's just Laravel just says anytime you create let's call it a content type, you're going to have like these various views. Like that's
I cheated. That's all. See, Laravel out of the box doesn't come with this type of scaffold.
Yeah.
It comes with shortcut commands that I could build my controller, build my model. But this one command runs all of those for us.
So the one command was the
scaffold one.
Which one was that? Oh, that was the library thing that you brought in.
Yeah.
That was your scaffold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and see, in it made all those files for us.
Yeah.
But the thing is, as you do this stuff over and over, you're like, well, it brought in stuff I didn't want, or I'm just going to copy from this other one.
No, I mean, basically, it's like you just created your scaffold is like, yeah, it's like in WordPress or in Drupal you create a content type. It did probably 10 times what your code did there. So, but in Laravel, like let's say vanilla Laravel, if I run, Laravel create me this, like whatever, I don't know what the artisan command was, but like create me this entity type, this content type. Would it generate that view with the table business and all that? Like
you would mostly do like 3 or 4 commands: make a model, make a controller, make a migration. It wouldn't do the view for you. But it would help you build all those other classes out, and the route is pretty much just that one line.
Yeah.
And so it would. He never took it that far, I think, because there's so many opinions at that level.
Yeah. No, I was just curious, like what it would get. Well, I'll try it when we're done with this. I'll try.
Yeah. So let's see. So basically, at that point, we have that resource ready to go. Now we have to fix it because you'll see like a lot of issues. Like if I create one, it's empty, right? Things like that. So we can go about fixing that, and then we can come back to here and I'll show you pagination. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. All right, we'll give it another 15 minutes or so, see how far we get.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Now, like I said, a lot of this you do over and over, and you get these things you want to copy-paste because it's so easy, right? I'm going to grab, I think it's this library. This is what I used for training about this, and I'm going to go grab a message thing, and I'm going to show you why in a moment. I want a message to show up every time. So we're going to prevent this from happening. I don't want to enter blank stuff, okay? So we're going to prevent that, okay? It's really simple. Validation, right? It's something we need to do in all our applications, okay? Now in Laravel, just remember how easy this, like, where is this happening? Well, is it in the route? Maybe. Is it in the controller, which is after the route? Maybe. And so you can really trace it back, right? So if we look at the route, we know it's using the shortcut resource and it's calling the things. So when somebody is making a form...
Oh, wait. My screen just did a weird thing.
Okay.
Oh, it's just my computer. What just...
Fell asleep?
Well, yeah. I sort of fell behind and stopped trying to keep up.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So remember how we listed the routes before?
Yep.
What I want to do is like when somebody, so these are basic methods that all forms use, get, post, delete, patch. And so when somebody's making a post, they use the post action just by chance. It could be blog, but it would always be post. And at that moment, they're going to talk to the post controller store, okay? So it's here that I want to put validation in, all right? And there's a shortcut name here as well. So if we go look in the form, just to show how clear all this stuff really is once you dig around, if we go into the form, create, it says, well, where's my form action? Well, I'm going to post right back to here, which is a shortcut name, all right? So let's go to our post controller under store. And we're going to come here, and it's going to hit here. So let's just prove that, okay? I'm going to click this. Oh, I'm in edit mode. So we want to go back to create mode because we're going to stop the problem here first, I guess. And I'm going to click create, and boom, we're here, okay? Now, this is so key. When you're doing typical PHP, you'll be hitting server, and you'll be hitting get, right? You have Symfony right now. So Symfony, this is a request class. And this extends the Symfony request and all of the power it gives us, okay? So inside of a request, I want to say, DD, just for the heck of it, give me
just see what it's
the
all about.
request
Yeah.
input, okay? Now, think about this. Dependency injection not only happens in the controller at the construct level, but also at the per method level. I can now take a request and instantiate it. So any class I need instantiated, I can do here. We'll go into more detail about that later.
So
But-
let me just say,
Yeah.
the store method
Yeah.
needs to know it needs an object called request.
It needs an object that should, like, it could just be this, right? But what we're saying is, like, not only do I want something, but I want it to follow the pattern of a request. Now, honestly, I think if I leave this out, it's actually going to not work because it's getting set up. So let's go try that. I'm going to post it again. So I said missing argument 1. So my mistake here, that actually is saying, you're going to instantiate from a pre-existing a singleton the request. So if we were to dig deep into Laravel,
So that is
go
2
there.
parameters?
It's one parameter. It's basically saying it's okay. And actually, I'll take that back for a moment.
Yeah.
It's not a parameter in the sense of like someone had to pass this in like an
Yeah.
ID. It's actually. I'll show you down here. If I stuck a request in here, okay, and we go look at that route list, see how the route list says, get me a post with an ID, right? Post, show. Now, from your thinking, you might be like, well, now Al added 2 requirements, right? But if I ran that route again, we haven't changed it, right? So the thing is, I'm not saying give me this. I'm saying, hey, dependency injection system, when you see this, I want you to instantiate a request for me so I can use it, okay? But think about this. A request is set up ahead of time. Now, let's find this because this is really actually pretty interesting stuff. A request is set up ahead of time. I don't want to say, let's see, aliases. So see how it's registering things along the way? So it's basically said, and this isn't the exact spot, but basically you're getting a sense of like, it's saying when someone wants to instantiate a request, let's
What
do
we're
it,
really
right?
talking about is
That, right? But it's also going to, when you register things with your application, you don't, and this is like way beyond what you typically need to know.
Yeah, no.
But it's interesting. It's totally
Yeah, it's
interesting. Yeah.
I mean, it'll pass back out of my brain soon enough.
Yeah.
That's okay.
But later on, it might
come back.
be nice. Yeah. Basically, it's going to go over all of these and register an alias, but later on, it's actually going to bind them. But my point is, a request is a long running, it's a singleton. It's not, I don't know technically how it works, but it's not it's not like I'm renewing it right here. It's actually carried over, I think, from the initial application starting point. But we'll come back to that more later.
So we're back in.
But let me show you here. So now that we're saying, hey, give me a request class so I can use it and access things, it's going to now say, I got your request. You see? Everything you were thinking you that was in that form is now here, because as long as the form field has a name field, it's going to be automatically posted, right? Or sent as a payload. So at this point, we can do something very slick. We can say validate, because inside of our class, this controller is validation, yeah. And we can say, hey, validation, you know how to use a request. Take it and go validate stuff for me, okay? And then I'm just going to use, which is written all in the docs. I should reference this more so you know there's no magic. I can say validation, and here's validation. And they just talk about how to use validation, how to introduce it into your code, how to copy paste this and put it where you need it, right? So it's really here, all this stuff. And it's basically saying, I need a title. It's required, right?
Gotcha.
And it also has a min of 3, right?
Right.
Oh, by the way, I need that body field to actually be there. It's required, but it has a max of we'll say 250 just for the heck of it, right? So at this point, we're going to get rejected from that process, and it's going to do what it should be doing, but there's no message yet.
Yeah.
It's gonna redirect us back to where it was coming from.
So we told it to validate it, but it doesn't know what to do, so it just loaded anyway.
It knows what to do, but our theme doesn't consider anything, right? Our theme's not saying, "Hey, show errors," right? So what I'm going to do is go grab that code I had, which was just some error templating, where it should be here, and I think here it's this one. So I just have this quick bit of code. I'm going to throw in. It's called errors blade. So I'm going to throw that in here. I don't like it's. I'm going to rename it though. Messages, we'll call it messages. .blade.php. I'm just going to throw that in there, okay? And it just says, hey, if you see errors, throw them out. If you see the session has a message, render it. If you see a status, show it, okay? Pretty simple stuff. We can explain it more later, but that's all. I'm just throwing a template file in there that will look for these errors. And then I want it to show up in all my files, not just the edit. So I'm going to go to my main file, and where it's yielding content, I'm just going to say, above that content, and I don't know how it's going to look just yet. Yeah. I'm going to include, and everything's relative to the view folder. Yep. I'm going to include messages and see how it actually typed it out for me.
But you didn't call the view in the controller yet, right?
Well, that's the thing. In the controller, it's so we're not in the store when we look at the form. We're at create, and create says load up post create.
Yeah.
And create says, hey, I extend layout.
So it's saying, there.
Yeah, it's saying I extend layout, and guess what part I am? I'm content. So you can have a sidebar. You can have different content areas.
Yeah.
And the docs will explain that really well. So now when we come back there and we reload this page and do a bad thing, it'll say the body field is required. I don't know why I didn't say the title field. I'm sure we can get there as well.
Yeah.
Let's see if it does it.
So
there is a mess up, right? So maybe I have a typo. It could be something so simple as that. So let's do that again just to make life simple. We'll do a dd request input. Let's go create, leave it empty. There's a title, title. It's spelled right, but I spelled required wrong. You see? Pretty simple.
Yeah.
End user. But yeah, so that's how easy we can start throwing validation, even to the point of like, hey, I want that to show underneath the field itself, right? And another thing too is like you don't want them to lose what input they had, right? So you could just put in here. In this one, I might have to Google old, and then I think text here. So again, the curly brackets, and we'll do. Body and user ID would be one of them. And it is complaining. That is interesting. I usually don't see PHP storm complain. So usually it's right when it does complain. It is me. Let's see what happens. So now if we do this. Oh, but that doesn't help. All right, see how I saved it?
Yeah.
And if we go here. Now, because I did all those returns, I actually put space in there. So let's get rid of that space I added. All right. So pretty much that easy to just say, hey, by the way, save that input. So that gets us validation. That gets us messages. It's validation can seem hard, but in this case, I think it makes it pretty easy.
Save method. Let me see that again.
Sure. Which one?
In the controller.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Good point. So this is really cool. Now that we've saved it, what is going on?
Yeah.
Right. So we pass validation. And we're saying, okay, now we want to save this thing, okay? And we're saying, give me a new post, which is the model post. So we made this model file. With all those files we made this one extra file called model.
Yeah.
And that represents our table. And it extends the main model, which is Eloquent. And it has a whole bunch of stuff that comes built in that we can override as we need to inside of our model.
So why in that file are we not seeing the stuff about the title and all that?
In the post?
Yeah.
It's just it's not needed because it's just it's basically Eloquent uses a schema of the table to help understand things, right? And so you don't really need much. One thing you learn about Laravel, it's a lot about conventions instead of configuration.
Yeah,
and it grabs that as much as needed. And then we can do things I'll show later for security. Like here's a good example of like mass protection, right? Mass assignment protection. There's this thing called fillable, right? And right now, no one could ever fake a user ID if by injecting it into a form because we're not allowing those type of shortcut injections. It's done here. You're really checking on it, right? Like I would never do this because you don't want someone to fake the user ID, right? So we'll circumvent that in one moment. But basically, you'll see here, I'll get to this line in just a moment, and then I'll show you what I'm talking about there. But we're saying, give me that new model with all of the logic that comes in a model, which is like a ton of logic. Like if we were to dump the post right here.
It's a whole thing. It's a whole world.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a lot, relative to models. Like what's fillable, what's my connection, what's my table, what's my primary key, hidden values, and then all the way down to whatever's happening in those other classes. There's that wasn't good. There's events and everything else too we can listen to and react to. Like when this model's saved, do I want to send an email? Things like that. So in this case, we're saying, give me a new post model, take its title, and put the input title, take its body, put the body in there, take the user ID and we don't want to just let them put any user. We're going to use another facade called auth, which we're not authenticated yet because we haven't plugged it in, right?
But we will.
Yeah, so in most cases, I would say, okay, you better use that because otherwise anyone can plug in anything they want. Right. And we'll come back to that later because we're not really doing that yet. I just wanted to put that there.
All right, cool.
So I'm going to say auth, guest, which of course they are. Then we'll put in, 0, otherwise put in 1, and we'll deal with reality later. And then we're saying post save, and that's your SQL query,
Yeah.
And then we're saying, okay, they're done. We're going to redirect them back to our named route, which is nicely called post index. And we're going to send a message back saying item created successfully. So you can say, post created successfully or whatever you want to do. And it's really that simple, honestly, to make that whole flow. And what more importantly for me is like, man, I've spent so much time sometimes just trying to alter a message somewhere because it's too hard to hook,
So, but is that method, that store method, that came out of, was that already in Laravel or is that in your?
Right. It's a convention, right? Now, what I mean by that is...
like, in other words, is that from Laravel or is that from your...
It's from Laravel.
Okay.
It's from Laravel. So when we use this shortcut, we're basically saving ourselves from typing several things. And I'll show you. I don't have to type them out. I'm just going to show you. That one line made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 routes. and they don't need to exist. I can make up all my own.
That one line
right?
being that artisan command.
No, this resource. You see, so I'm saying, hey, Laravel, I made this resource called post.
Yeah.
Therefore, I want you to use this controller.
Okay. So here's
with all your known conventions.
So that route resource is, instead of saying for just the get on the homepage, this is I've got a resource here, and that means a whole bunch of routes.
Exactly. Yeah. Instead of saying route get, route post, route put, right? Nice. And then point in every single method on the controller. Right. It's just a shortcut that says, okay, if you're going to do this, we're going to have some conventions.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm going to make you this controller with these methods, and each method has a job that we note in the
and that's
text
where those
here.
came out of.
Yeah. Now my scaffolding thing happened to fill in some blanks, but in the end, it would have gave you the same thing. So if I typed in, I don't know why it keeps doing that. If I type in this, we'll just do one really quick. PHP artisan make controller. Foo controller, right? Mm-hmm. It's because I didn't ask it to be plain. It's going to say, oh, then you must want all of our default methods. Now it doesn't give me all that other stuff, but because there's so much to assume, right? But it gives us the methods because those are part of the convention you'd have to follow to use the resource. But yeah, so that's. That's making a post in somewhat of a nutshell.
Yeah.
We can go. What we'll do next time is we'll go into editing, and then we'll go into pagination, which will introduce seeding, which I think is really powerful. Yeah. Where we can seed like 20 things, so you can paginate through 5 at a time, and you can basically hand it off to the QA people to show them pagination works.
Right.
So we can do that next time. Edit. And maybe finally we'll just plug in authentication because all this stuff is fairly simple.
All right, cool. So I don't know if this part will be recorded, but so I should go back and do it because at a certain point around 20% in, I just stopped typing.
Yeah, but that's okay. Yeah. And you're right, though. Go play around.
Yeah.
Come back with questions, and don't feel like you have to produce the exact same thing.
No, I won't.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in is like, okay, so let's say I did it without your scaffold.
Scaffold? Yeah.
I would just make, I'd do artisan make this controller, or make this, what do you call that thing? I keep calling it a content type, but it's not a content type. It's a
resource.
It's a resource.
Yeah. I mean, you could call it like a resource. I don't know if there's a normal. It's definitely called a model.
Yeah, it's a model.
Yeah.
So basically, artisan make it, and then I've already got those methods.
Yeah.
For all of them, especially if I do the resource route.
Yeah.
And then I just have to call the view. So in the router, you're like, if I hit, post/edit, show me this view.
Yeah. You mean in the particular in the browser?
Yeah, like if I was doing it without the scaffolding.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, basically, I'm saying the big pattern is get the route, post/edit, then show me the view, edit screen or whatever. And then your view has a form in it, and the form says form action equals, like if it was WordPress, it'd be like form action equals PHP, blah. But in this case, it's going to be like form action equals whatever, some
that
object.
Particular shortcut. This guy here,
exactly.
It's it's like you were saying. Here's PHP inside of the theme,
right?
And it's called, the function just happens to be route, and it just happens to be using the particular name of the route because we gave it names via that resource. If I didn't use the resource, then I'd have to name them myself. Here, I'll show you really quick in the route. Like if I was to say route, let's get rid of resource for a moment. Route. what did they use for create? So get, post, create, return, post controller, create. Then that's going to return our form, right? But the moment they post, which has no end to it, it's just right to there, that would be store, right?
Yeah.
And then if I wanted to then get that same one later on, it would be post, because I'm saying, hey, I'm going to pass in an ID, right? And that would be show. And then, you would then get into that point where you're like, hey, now I want to put that back because I want to update it. And that's where you get into put back to here, and that would be the update, I think.
But how would you tell it which view?
Yeah, that's a good one. So basically, instead of doing it here, which you could do, but it's just it's fine.
Yeah.
They do it all in the controller, so they're back in the controller. So you're kind of, it's the theory of MVC, where like the view has some logic, the models have some logic, the controllers have some logic, model view controller. So the logic here is the controller's like, I know what you want, and I'm going to give it back to you via the view. In this case, store is redirecting back to index, and index is using the view post index, right? The create's using post create.
So the store, let me just see where the store gets to
store.
view.
See, the store doesn't have a view, because think about it, the store is just
there's
a post.
nothing to see.
Yeah.
So, but our view gets called. Where is it that we told? Well, I guess in yours it was the request. So everything there is only that one view anyway.
For creating.
So how does it know which view to load ever? It's saying.
Yeah.
I'm just looking. So you called it here, where you say return redirect the root post index.
Right. So this is a redirect. So it's basically using Symfony's redirect to say, I'm not calling a view. I'm actually going to go send you somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's actually sending you here. Okay. Post. Sorry. Let me put the post. And we'll start with a /. It's basically doing is post, right? It's an index, right? And it's saying, go to here when I'm done. Don't go to a view. Let it deal with the view.
Yeah.
Now, but we know that when the route gets a post request, right? So if we look here, when the route gets a post request, it's going to call to this.
Right.
And so when that guy gets called, it's like, okay, I'm going to get your post, and I'm going to then return a view.
Yeah.
I'm not going to redirect you again. You'll be redirected forever.
Right. I see.
Yeah.
I see.
And
so redirect to posts anyway. I got you now.
Yeah. And we use these, we just happen to use this naming syntax because it's nice.
Yeah.
Later on, you could change it to blog, but you wouldn't have to change any of your names. But that's something later.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that.
And then, no, go ahead.
Well, what?
Okay, so this is a super basic thing. But like, let's say you're building this application, and you've got these different, I keep calling them content types. I don't know what else to call them. Things, entities, posts.
Yeah, entities, fine, whatever,
And whatever. So when I am starting to build my application and build my way around the application, to call these routes, do you literally just like, I don't want to say hard code them, but you construct the routes in the app. Like if I do this, go to, this, like you mash some strings together until you get the route and then pass that to the link and then it happens. Do you see what I'm saying?
So if you were working inside of a theme file and you wanted to send someone somewhere kind of thing?
Well, no, like even as you're building your application, like I'm fast forwarding, but it's like, is that how you send the like the user flow? Like because I feel like it's kind of a hack that I do all the time in WordPress, and I'll look up at the URL, be like, oh, holy shit, it's like I built that URL, but
Yeah.
I'm not being very clear. I guess what I'm saying is like to get my way around the application, do you end up just building links that are themselves that creates what calls the various actions? Right? Like if everything's coming out of the route,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, from here I want this user to now save this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Are you constructing a link that leads to that route that does that action?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of those frameworks come with out of the box route conventions.
Yeah.
Like, Drupal, for example, is node one edit,
Right.
node one,
Right,
right?
exactly.
So, what we saw a moment ago was conventions, post, edit, post create, right? Those are just conventions based off of some standards. Like, unlike Drupal, I can use post for both my get and my actual post
Right.
methods,
Right.
right? Now, but I could have done anything, and I could build it up, and then inside of my views, I can use shortcut methods to say, because they do a whole bunch in here where they're like, hey, you're in edit mode, but maybe you want to go back, so I'm going to give you a link that goes back
Yeah, that's
to
what I'm
post
talking
index.
about right there. So
Yeah.
you just literally you're building it inside the. Well, no, that's saying href. Yeah, that's saying this links to
That route. We gave it a nice name. Yeah. But you're not building it, right? Your route file, which you can have more than one route file, but in this case we have one route file saying, what to do, right?
Yeah.
Like in our route file, we have that nice syntax, but honestly, if I did this, just so you can see let's see, foo uses that, all right?
Mm-hmm.
So now if we were to do that route list again after all the weird things I did, and I must have something, oh yeah, I left out this. We now took that shortcut and we've now done it manually to a degree. We didn't do them all. And we gave it a nice name, which is foo, but we're basically allowing ourselves to later on, like if we built all these views with that href to here, but then one day we're like, oh, it shouldn't be called post, it should be called blog.
Yeah.
We'd have to go to all the views and update them, but we can now use this nice name and reference it in our views so that later on, even if we change this, it will generate whatever we changed it to.
That's cool.
So you're keeping you're using the HTML just the way you want to stick things in there, but these little tricks can help prevent that extra work. But we honestly could have just done this. I mean, honestly, there's boom, you're done.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But that wouldn't exist though. That's not making it, right?
Yeah. Because
if it wasn't in that route file.
Yeah, exactly. And if especially if you hadn't hit. Yeah, exactly. So the reason, so this is, I guess, my question. So the reason we don't do just /posts and be like, yeah, hard code it, is that there's a lot, I still don't get it yet, but this route method being called in here knows what we're up to.
Let's go look. There's no magic. PHP Storm, hold the command button down, click on it. Boom. Give me a name. Give me some parameters because I might want to pass an ID. Is it absolute? And is it this?
Yeah. And then
return app. So app is that thing we instantiated. Yeah. Give me its URL method. So remember how we registered all these things? Mm-hmm. So there's a class shortcut called URL, which has the power to say it has a method called route. And when you pass route, when you pass this information, it just figures it out. So let's go see what that means, right? So if I do a dd app, let's see. Actually, let me go look.
URL.